All right, so welcome back to week 2, everyone. I hope you all had fun scraping stuff over the past week. I know I talked to at least a couple of you about sort of some things you're working on. There were also some fun things that got put in Slack. I saw Adam, I believe, put in a cool demo around using like a t-SNE or like a mapping system. So maybe we'll talk about that in a minute. I'm working on some other similar ideas around checking for diversity and that sort of thing that I'll share more next week. So I think we'll have a fun class today of looking at some additional sort of dataset tool stuff, and then we'll look at how to like implement a web scraper, like a website specific one. So um, I think, was it Will? Will, you were asking a lot of questions around dataset tools, which I really appreciated, but it also showed that like I have forgotten many of my own things within my own library. So I think one thing that I'm going to try to do over the next week or two is just do a better job of documenting some stuff. I know Leah is going to cover some of that material today, so hopefully that will also stick in my brain. The truth is I write a lot of that stuff for myself, and then I use it on one project and then completely forget about it. And if things are broken that say they shouldn't be broken, let me know. I can go ahead and fix it. But yeah, there's often times things in there that should be doing something that aren't for whatever reason. So cool. Leah, do you want to kick us off with just sort of the schedule and maybe start doing breakout
Sure.
rooms?
Yeah. I think in order to do breakout rooms, I need to be a co-host or maybe the host. I forget, but let me share my screen.
I just made you a host, so you should be able to
Okay,
do it now.
nice. Okay, cool. Yeah, so last week we like kind of gave you guys an intro to datasets and a little bit on ethics. Today, I'm going to first be covering ways that you can make a data set from video, and then also some tools within dataset tools. And then after, Derek will be doing a demo of Beautiful Soup, which is a really powerful like web scraper if you want to scrape things from a website. Um, also, we're going to have one-on-ones, and we'll send out our Calendlies if you wish to have a 20-minute meeting with Derek or I to talk about your project or questions you have. Yeah, next week we'll be covering classifiers and detectors for your data sets. Yeah, so today we're going to kick it off with a breakout session. So we're going to put you guys in like groups of 3-ish to talk about what you made or like the data sets that you've tried to gather, blockages you came into, and just kind of like seeing what other people are making and sharing knowledge. After that, I'll do 2 demos, one on walking you through making a data set from a video, and then also some tools within dataset tools. And then, yeah, like I said earlier, Beautiful Soup is in store for the second half of class. Oh yeah, so with that, let me put you guys into breakout rooms to talk about your data sets.
And even if you didn't get to do anything this week, maybe talk a little bit about what you're interested in or what you're trying to find, because there's a good chance that other folks will have ideas on where to go about and find those things. So this will be pretty light, just a way for you guys to talk to each other and make sure, maybe anywhere where you're stuck, other people can help, or if you're a little shy about asking for help, maybe they can suggest Lee or I help you somewhere. So yeah, it should be a fun, like little, like short, what we're going to do, like 5-10 minutes. Is that right?
Yeah,
Cool. Yeah.
yeah.
So cool. All right.
Okay, you guys will be sucked into your breakout rooms now. Okay.
Sorry, I'm just gonna be the oh.
Oh, we were the early kids.
We're all
Good
back here.
Groundhog's Day.
Wait, is it another breakout room?
Yeah, I think the other people trickle back in the next 40 seconds.
They'll all be just dragged, kicking and screaming back.
Everyone got sucked back in.
Yep. Just Shanna, so I'll talk about that more next week, just to finish up that conversation. So I'm interested to hear from everyone's breakout groups. Were there any common sort of issues that you heard across everyone, or like just if anyone had like a really one thing they really want to talk about? So maybe just a couple group representatives, or maybe people just want to chime in and talk about like what they sort of heard. I'll call on people if I have to.
I can go. I think I kind of hogged most of the time, to be honest. To say that I haven't really scraped that much due to other commitments this week, but I do have an idea of looking at manuscripts, illuminated manuscripts, and so like it was an achievement for me just to install the actual Datasets tool and the Instagram scraper, and that's all working really nicely. But when I was looking at some of what was being returned by Instagram, it turns out that the museum website actually has much higher resolution and much better quality of what I'm looking for, I think. So I'm interested to see what the other, I guess, tools that are part of the dataset tool set, to see how I can start using it.
Cool. Yeah, definitely. We'll definitely talk about, I think museums are a very common application for where you might want to write your own scraper because, they're not easily accessible, or like they are built in their own sort of custom websites, and you might want to try to figure out how to do that. So we'll definitely look at an example of that later today. Somebody else? You don't even have to talk about your own project. You can talk about what the group talked about if you want to.
So I was in the same group as Owen, but I think the common thing that we both ran into is, which Derek, I shared with you, but we both have like manuscript-like websites or like source to scrape from. And like for my case, it's a link where it's probably like a PDF where you just kind of have to flick through the pages, like something like that. It's like, how do you scrape it? How do you crop into it? So that's one thing that I know you said you're going to cover it next week, I think, but that was one of the common issues that we both came across.
Yeah, PDFs are tricky because they aren't easy to scrape. There are some tools I've seen, but it just depends on how well the PDF was built. But I also think with the one that you found, there was also just like a download that you could download from the Internet Archive that was just raw images, I believe. Maybe? Okay, so, but yes, some of these are definitely hard, and they make it harder than it should be. Or maybe they make it hard on purpose, one of the two. Yeah.
I was going to ask about PDFs because I was using some torrent sites to download magazine archives, like Omni magazine and stuff like that, if anyone remembers. But yeah, I was having issues with extracting this stuff.
I'll look around and see what's available like off the shelf for PDFs. It's definitely one of those things where like there's got to be some tool out there, I would imagine. So we can take a look and try to see what's available for it.
I like to go for the low-hanging fruit with some of these apps that are really easy to use, and they download tons of stuff. You know, I haven't yet gone through it all and isolated the ones I wanted to use, but I had a Pinterest site of a pose. I have a collection of wedding negatives that aren't, you know, from other people, about 1 million of them, and they're 2¼ by 3¼ color from the mid-century. And I digitized a few thousand of those and have shown them in groups based on the pose. So it's about 60 or 70 different poses. And I thought that would be something easy to do with what we're talking about, using StyleGAN 2 with categories. And maybe the cumulative categories would provide some additional information to each other, I don't know. But one thing I did is I tried, previously tried in StyleGAN 2, some of my wedding photographs with wedding negatives of things that are quite different, like brides and wedding cars painted up in, you know, the escape car. And I ended up with images that combine the car with the figures that were very interesting. And some of them looked like Martian ships that were going into outer space, and just all kinds of things that you would never see. So, you know, that's my goal, is to kind of try to find those kind of new types of visuals that, you know, you would never otherwise access and tell a story with them.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that is exactly sort of what StyleGAN does. It will try to mash up cars and people into some sort of, like, you know, weird messiness. And I think it's sort of like some people want to try to keep them separate. And then some people will try to combine them. And it's sort of like there's a couple different ways in which you can go about both of those. So yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about classes of labeled data next week as well. And I think that that might help us as well to think about sort of like what we can start to do with labeling things in the future. Because I think also what was really cool is the notebook that Adam shared sort of looks at like how you might group things without it being labeled. It's sort of like, right, it's like clustering. And I actually have a notebook that I'll probably share next week on doing some image clustering and a similar sort of capability to the way that Adam's notebook worked, which uses sort of pre-trained models. As I'm sure many of you found out, I know Esteban found this out, other folks probably will too. Those pre-trained models are really good for things like photographs of cars or, you know, objects. But when you get to abstract artwork, they kind of fall apart because they've been trained to find objects that are real, or, you know, objects that have some sort of class label to them. So when you feed it in an abstract image, it can struggle to figure out how to manage those things. Sometimes you get interesting clusters out of it, and sometimes you get like gobbledygook. And this is sort of the challenge with being artists, is that like we are generally providing sort of like nonlinear thought into our classes and labels, and it doesn't always match up with what the machine tries to see in things. So we'll talk a little bit more about that next week, but it's definitely like a big challenge as we try to use these tools for more artistic purposes, and not just like, is this a car or is it a cell phone, that sort of thing. So cool. So I think we should jump into some of the demos. So Leah, I'm going to turn it over to you again.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I know from the pre-class survey that a lot of you wanted to sort of cover ways to make your own data sets from scratch, meaning like not scraping things from the internet. Yeah, I hate to break it to you, but if you are just making your own data set from scratch, it will just be a lot of hours of manual labor. There's not much of a way to get around that. But there are a lot of different ways you can do this. Like if you have think about what you have a lot of access to, like for yourself, like if you have like a collection of magazines or something, or a lot of drawings you've done, you can go ahead and like photograph a lot of them or scan them. Another thing you can do is if you have a large image, like you might have like a very high res image, you can split that image, like tile it into a lot of sub images. And that's a way to get like a lot of images out of like a single high res image, and get like a lot of bang for your buck. Another thing you can do is you can generate a lot of images with code. This would be like if you're making generative art in like P5 or something. if you have code to generate images for you, then that's a lot easier than going and photographing or making things by scratch on your own. Another method is you can take a video and split it into frames. So you can take your phone or a camera and record something and then split it into frames. And that's what I'll be covering today. And I've also had a couple of students who know Cinema 4D or are well-versed in animation, and they make renders of things and then split that animation into frames and then train their Stalgian model on that. So today I'll be going through taking a video and splitting into frames. So yeah, the general workflow for this is you get a video, which you can either take yourself with your phone or something, or you can scrape it from YouTube or some other source. Then you can do some pre-processing to just kind of get the video in a state that's good for a data set. And then you split it into PNGs with FFmpeg, and then you convert it to JPEGs. This is a little, steps 3 and 4 happen because what I have found just from my own experimentation is that FFmpeg JPEGs are really downscaled and poor quality. And so what I have done in the past is gotten FFmpeg to split the video into PNGs and then later on convert to JPEG with dataset-tools. So yeah, the very first step is getting a video. You can either film your own or grab one from YouTube. So one thing that I did for one of my models is I scraped this video from YouTube with this YouTube downloader. And yeah, it's just a 4K video of flowers blooming. And I scraped this. After it's scraped, it's not the right size for a Stalgian dataset. It's not square. And yeah, so after downloading this, I needed to do some pre-processing of this video before actually splitting it into frames, which I did in a video editor called DaVinci Resolve, or you could do in After Effects or in Premiere Pro, your video editor of choice. But what I did was after downloading this, I took out the intro part, took out the back part, took out flowers I didn't think I wanted in my data set and removed those from the hour-long video that this is. I also spent some time realigning all the flowers because some of them, here in this case, there are 2 of them and they're not centered. And so I went through and made sure for each of the flower sections that, they're sort of onion skinned overlaid on each other. And I also went through and removed the black background just because for my data set, wanted a white background. And yeah, also within the video editor, cropped it to a square. Yeah, I think if you're using a video, I suggest doing all of this in the video editor rather than splitting into frames and then doing this with the individual frames, just because I think it's overall easier to operate on a video than to operate with thousands and thousands of images. But yeah, after getting your video into square where things are overlaid on top of each other and you've done all of your data massaging pre-processing, then you can go ahead and split it into frames. So this video, after that process, became these flowers. And yeah, this is with the black background removed. There are some little wonky bits from where bits of the vase or whatever were removed as well. But yeah, and yeah, I had to add a little bit of white space. You can see right here, this has a hard crop at the bottom. But yeah, I just realigned them so they were all sort of onion skinned, overlaid over each other. And then after that, I split it into frames with FFmpeg, which is just this command line tool, which is pretty easy to download. And yeah, essentially, you just use it to take a video and split it into frames, or vice versa. If you have a lot of frames and want to make them into a video, it's just a command line tool to work with videos and frames. This is a command that you'll just you can copy and paste it and put it into your terminal. This will take a 60-second long video and extract 1 frame per second. You'll replace these yellow parts with the names of your input video and your output folder. And yeah, pretty important here. Make sure to use .png, just because in the past when I've used .jpeg with FFmpeg, FFmpeg's output JPEGs have been not great quality and made things fuzzy. So yeah, generally suggest using PNGs. And Derek also has a pretty great video on using FFmpeg, and it's linked down here if you want a video tutorial of that. And
sorry, and I'll just chime in and say that if you're going to use a video, the frames per second matters a decent amount, depending on whether you want images that are all really similar or images that are pretty different. And I think the reason Leah has that 1 frame per second is that 1 frame per second will definitely give you very different images, right? Because of that smooth motion. You might want to play with something like 2 frames per second or 3 frames per second. If you get up to 24 frames per second or higher, you're basically going to have a lot of duplicate images, or things that the model will essentially think are duplicates because there's sort of a compression set up with a lot of these. So definitely keep your FPS low, I would say, for your first couple tests at least.
Yeah, when it comes to frames per second, you're going to be playing with the diversity of your data set. So if you sample every second, that's going to be, you're going to have a more overall diverse data set than if you sample really, really, really often. Yeah, and then you can use the dataset-tools library to finally convert the PNGs to JPEGs. And yeah, generally using JPEGs is better for training, just because they'll be a lot smaller in size. So it'll just be easier to work with when you're transferring things in between your computer to some GPU server. It'll be, just the overall data transfer process will be a lot faster and easier if you have all your images in JPEGs. A 5th optional step, which you may or may not need to do, is deduping. If you're using a video, you probably won't need to dedupe, since each frame will be slightly different, kind of like that example with Bone from last class, where Bone is slightly angled at a different angle. But yeah, this would be the command if you are trying to dedupe all your frames. Yeah, does anybody have any questions about getting a dataset from video?
One thing I'll add is with the deduping, this is again a case of where if you have some stuff that's really similar, there is a function within the deduping tools that allows for relative matching. It's much slower, but if you take a too high of frames per second and you want to sort of eliminate those, probably the best way is actually to go back and rerun it with a lower frames per second. It'll be faster. But if you are just sort of interested in maybe seeing if you can find fuzzier regions to sort of match things and remove it, you can go ahead and use, there's a relative function with dedupe, which I'll post the link to as well. And then it looks like Adam had a question for you, which I'm also interested in. Was it difficult to remove the background in your video?
Oh, yeah. So with this video specifically, it wasn't awful because the video itself is already black, has a black background. So yeah, I just went through and DaVinci has this eyedropper tool, so I just selected it and it kind of removed all the blacks. And I had to play with the threshold so that, it didn't eat up all the little shadows of the flowers. But yeah, overall, I think doing all the pre-processing on this video took me 3 or 4 hours in total. Yeah.
What YouTube downloader did you use to get the high resolution video to download?
So I linked it here. It's just a thing I found when I Googled YouTube downloader. But yeah, when you input a link into here, it gives you different options for like what resolution you want to download it at. But like regardless, when you're training in StyleGAN 2, you'll be restricted to like 1024 as your max. So even if you can download like a 4K video, you'll still need to downsample it in order to like actually train a StyleGAN 2 model. Yeah.
There's also a good command line tool called YouTube-DL that also does like playlists and other things. I was planning to do a demo of that this week, but my time got away from me. But I'll try to see if I can come back to that for next week for folks who are interested. It's pretty easy to use, and it downloads like the highest resolution available to you. So it's like pretty fast.
Okay, cool. Second demo of the day is using dataset-tools. So dataset-tools has a couple of different process types. So this is like if you have a photo or a folder of photos, different ways you can do some pre-processing before getting them ready for training. One particular example. One particular example is process type resize. This will maintain the aspect ratio of your input photo. I'm going to actually go ahead and show you guys this in Terminal. So let me share my screen, my entire screen. Yeah, so I have this. Let me delete these. So I have this photo of my cat, and the original resolution of this is 900 in this dimension by 418 in this dimension. So I can go in here, and I'm in Terminal. This is my folder with, the photo of my cat inside. And if I want to resize this to a 1024 size, I can go ahead and do this. So I'm going Python 3 dataset-tools / dataset-tools.py. That's the script within the dataset-tools folder. I'm telling it my input folder is this folder called Shriley, the name of my cat. And then I'm saying I want to output it to this folder that I'm going to name Shriley resize. And the process type, I'll tell it to resize, and then I will also give it a maximum size of 1024. And that's telling it that I want to resize to 1024. And so running this means that now I have this new folder here, Shriley resize 1024. And yeah, as you can see, if I check the new, if I check the new dimensions, it's like now been downscaled, like scaled down to 1024 as its maximum dimension. So this will maintain the aspect ratio if you are like scaling up or down. There are also these options if you want to input like a particular height or a particular width if I wanted this dimension to be 600, I could do dash dash width equals 649 or equals 600, and then it would make that pixel dimension exactly 600 pixels.
I think the height and width will force the size. So if you don't want it to maintain your aspect ratio, you also need to figure out, or if you don't want it to maintain the aspect ratio, then you can put in whatever numbers. If you do want it to maintain aspect ratio, I'd probably play with max size more than the other one. Again, there's lots of like little weird edge cases of this library since I just sort of made it up myself. But yeah, just be aware of that. Another like little quick tip that I probably have never told anyone this, but in the output folder, if you add a slash to the end of your output folder, you will create a new folder that is called 1024 inside of that folder. If you don't leave a slash, you will get the name plus 1024. That is like a little like secret tip that maybe depending on how you want to manage your files is helpful or not. This is all stuff that is never documented anywhere, and this is probably the first time I'm telling anyone about this, so just be aware of that.
Okay, I just tested using height 15 and width 200, and it has squashed my cat into something very flat. Yeah. So if you specify a specific like height and width, it will force that specific height and width, and you will get like a stretched word image.
And if you're in the StyleGAN class that's happening next month, I'll explain why I added that feature and why we're going to use it. So there is this is getting very complicated. I'm adding too much. I'm like ruining Leah's demos. I'm sorry. But basically, if you have images that are all the same dimension, one technique you might want to do is you might actually just want to squish them to square, and then run StyleGAN on them and then unsquish them when you actually bring them out. That basically allows you to maintain the aspect ratio, but all your images should be the same aspect ratio, right? So that StyleGAN learns like the features of a squished or unsquished data set. So again, like little tips here and there of things that we're learning, but we'll also talk about that more in the StyleGAN class as well if you're interested.
Yeah, and that would come up like in the case like maybe you've scraped a landscape type video from YouTube, and then you want your final output to still be like landscape. You can squash them all down to square and then train, and then once the outputted images come out, you can like unsquash them, stretch them out to have like an outputted landscape video. Cool. Moving on, the next process type is square. This process type square comes with this border type option where you can describe like different things you want to do to make your final outputted photo a square. For example, you can add solid color borders. You can also tell it to reflect, in which case it'll do this reflection. And so we can check that out right now. Process type square and border type. Let's do solid. And if you're doing border type solid, you need to specify a border color to fill in the borders. So this will be, border dash border color.
Might be an underscore.
Yeah. Let's see. Yep, that was it.
I think everything in this library is underscores, which other libraries are dashes, and there's no like consistency to this stuff. But I think everything in this library is underscores.
Okay, I see. Yeah, so this has gone ahead and filled in our border colors with blue. And I think like if you wanted, I think this will be either green or red. Let's see. Yep. Yeah, so this is BGR for specifying that. And likewise, yeah, you could just put in a reflect for border type, and it'll reflect the edges to fill in to square. And the third process type that you will use most often is this crop to square, which will literally just like cut into your image to make it a square. So we can go ahead and try that out here. Process type crop to square. And that is here. So it's gone ahead and like actually removed parts of my image to force it to be square. So yeah, these are all just like, different ways that you can sort of like massage the data you have to make it fit the input format that you need. Yeah, and they're just kind of like I guess, like stylistic choices or choices you kind of have to make when deciding how you want to process or process your data.
Yeah, and just I think sometimes I get questions around when should I use a border type of solid or when should I use a border type of reflect. I would say a lot of it comes down to what your data set is. My general approach is to do reflect. Part of the reason why you might want to use reflect is remember that StyleGAN is looking for edges and shapes to learn. So if you don't feed it edges or shapes on those edges, it won't learn anything. So it'll just learn like a solid color there. And I have a sort of sneaking suspicion that the more it learns edges, the more likely it is to train better elsewhere as well. So I tend to move toward reflections, but it's worth remembering that if you reflect every one of your images, so let's say all of your images are rectangular and you reflect all of them and maybe it's a person or it's like a closely cropped portrait, the model will learn to reflect faces. And you may either like not like that look, or you might want to actually like crop down on your images again once you've like output it from StyleGAN. So StyleGAN works best, again, we'll talk about this in the StyleGAN class, but it really prefers to be done in squares. I've previously taught ways to do rectangles, and that's totally a feasible way to work. And I'll talk about, again, in the StyleGAN class, why you might want to use squares or rectangles. But the reason we might want to use squares for that class in particular is there's a lot of other tools that assume your StyleGAN model is in square, so you can do some other fun operations from it. So that's sort of the challenge and why I've sort of like moved toward pushing everyone into stretching or fitting to squares. But there might be some examples where you really do want to just use a rectangular function, and you can either do the process type of your solid borders, or you can actually generate a rectangular model. But there are downsides to both those. But that's just sort of how I've begun to approach using padding. Now, if you are not using StyleGAN, like so much of this is really geared towards StyleGAN because of its square requirements. Things like CycleGAN, or I believe even Pix2Pix, will like, they can take any sort of image shape in, and they will train, the way they train is they actually take a square patch of the image and they train patches to patches. So other models don't require some squares. So you might just want to be using a resize tool to resize to a similar shape and size. So let's say all of your horse images are like 2000 pixels tall and all of your zebra pictures are like 800 pixels tall. Like you might run into issues there because of the mismatch in size. So you might just actually want to normalize both data sets to be around the same shapes and sizes. But in general, it's going to change depending on what you want to do. And I would just say like, if you have questions about a particular data set type for a particular model, I'm happy to field questions there. But you know, I assume a lot of folks in here are taking the StyleGAN class, so we've sort of geared a lot of this content toward the StyleGAN materials. Leah, is there anything else?
Nope. With that,
cool.
yeah, we could take a break right now. Or,
Yeah, so why don't we take a 5-minute break? So we'll come back at 5 till wherever you are. If you have questions or sort of as you're thinking about this and you have questions, we'll do a little bit of Q&A on the Datasets tool stuff afterward. Cool? All right, see everybody in 5 minutes. Okay, well, we lost a little bit of that recording. If you have questions about those things, let me know and I'll let folks know. I'll add links to these things to our class site as well to make sure that we're covered there. All right, so web scraping. Everyone can see my screen, right? Cool, all right, great. So last week we posted links to a lot of different web scrapers. You know, there's things to scrape Instagram, Flickr, Pinterest, a bunch of social networks. There was a good one that I talked about either last week or maybe added a video to last week about using Bing. So there's a lot of tools for these sort of like big engines, right? But a lot of times what will happen is like you'll come across sites like museums, libraries, universities, internet weirdos with like big strange hobbies and collections. And a lot of these people tend to have like their own websites, right? So, you know, some of them might post their work to Flickr or might post things to Instagram, but more than likely they're maybe building their own websites, especially libraries and universities love building their own websites that never get touched again. So like there's a lot of websites that like are built in like 90s tech and like clearly crumbling and falling apart, but they have a really great collection of images, excuse me. So, you know, what do we do in those cases? So there's a couple of things you can do. The first is there are a lot of tools out there that will just scrape all the images it can find on a page. So I'll link to 2 of them in just a minute, but one thing you could do is go page by page on a website and hit this, like, there are some that are command line interfaces and there are some that are like Chrome extensions. You can just hit this button, download all the images. The downside to this is, one, they tend to work on a page by page basis. So if you have like a, I don't know, like an index page that lists, you know, thousands of pages, your ability to click through those thousands of pages is like kind of manual. You have to do it, run the script on that URL, then like download the images, do it to the next URL, next URL, next URL. The other problem with this is that if you just scrape all the images on the page, depending on how someone built the website, you might get their logo, you might get other crap, you might get like little like icons or hovers or other things that you don't necessarily want in your data set. So it's a little bit sort of greedy. It's just going to grab everything it finds on the page, regardless of the type of image it is. Some of these tools do allow you to set by like what's the minimum or maximum size of things, but these tools do exist. The one that I tend to send people toward the most is what's called Image Downloader. It's just a Chrome extension. If you run it on a page, it will just like literally say like, here's all the images I see. Do you want to set like a min height or a min size? And then you can download those to a folder. Esteban mentioned that there's this cool one that I haven't actually seen before. It's called Image Scraper. It's more of a command line interface. So it works a little bit more like the Instagram scraper, that sort of thing. And it will just grab all the images from a predefined URL. So you could also use that. So those are 2 sort of like off-the-shelf options. The option we're going to look at today is using a tool called Beautiful Soup. And what's nice about this is that you can sort of automate and customize how you go through scraping a website. So we're going to go through 2 examples today, just sort of show you how a little bit of a difference between them can operate. But basically you'll be able to say like, I want to go from this page to this page to this page to this page, and I'm going to grab all images of a certain type or a certain style using HTML and CSS. Yes, mostly HTML, but some CSS as well. So yeah, so this is just gonna this is gonna speed up our process, gonna give us a little bit more of a pattern matching sort of system. The challenge is that you do need to know a little bit of Python. So, you know, if you know how to write a for loop or that sort of thing, or you can read sort of a for loop of an example code that I've written, that's a lot of what we need to do. Knowing how to write a loop and then maybe knowing how to write like a get function or something. That's pretty much it. So it's not like super high level or super detailed Python, but you do need to know how to write or read a little bit of code. And lastly, you should have some knowledge of how HTML works. So again, this isn't that you need to be able to write HTML or write CSS or like you have some sort of custom, you know, knowing how to do web dev in 2020. Like you don't need that level of experience, but what you should be able to understand is like how HTML works from like what we call the document object model, the DOM. So that means that divs, like paragraph tags, get stuck inside of a div, or list tags get stuck inside of an unordered list. And knowing how things nest is going to be kind of helpful for how this all works. So I would say that there's probably videos on the internet that like if you're not familiar with this, you could probably watch like a 30-minute video and at least have some sort of rough understanding of how that stuff works. And lastly, I would say like if you want to do something like this, but you don't know where to start, or like you're just struggling trying to adapt some of the code that I'll give you, please let Leah or I know during a co-working session. We're happy to sort of like walk you through a little bit more or help write these things. So actually what happened is Nowco reached out to me, I believe last night or yesterday, and was sort of like, here's a page. And I was like, oh, this would be a perfect Beautiful Soup demo. So I stole her idea and like, I'm going to show a demo of how to work this. But so we got like 800 really, really high res images. And it took me, you know, obviously I know what I'm doing and have done this before. It took me about an hour to write the code. And it took about 3 or 4 hours to download all the images because it's from a university or like some sort of older site that definitely has a slow server. So, you know, that is much better than clicking through 800 pages and downloading each image one by one. So, you know, if it's 100 images, I would say decide what you think is like actually going to take you the longest amount of time. If it's 50 images, you probably want to do it by hand. If it's, you know, 1,000 images or 500 images and the site tends to load really slowly, a scraper like Beautiful Soup might work better. So the process that I go through for all of these scrapings is I sort of like, first thing is I go through the website. I try to figure out what the patterns are. Most of these websites are designed by coders who have some sort of like pattern language or way in which they approach building a website to make it scale. So the patterns could be something like, what's the URL pattern? how does the URL change going from page to page? It could be, how is the page structured? Do I want to grab all of the anchor tags? Do I want to grab all the list tags? Like, what am I looking at? And then I'm going to sort of like figure out like a rough sort of mental model of how I would want to approach this site. And then I will go ahead and start writing the code. And the way to write the code is you start by just grabbing all the pages. You find the links or like the image tags you want to grab from. And then there's a really simple couple lines of code to download those images into a folder on your desktop. So again, this, I highly recommend if you haven't installed Anaconda yet, that you install Anaconda, because this will be like a helpful way to like create an environment that is called Beautiful Soup or Web Scraper or something, and keep all your code there. So that way it doesn't interfere with other tools you might have. And lastly, as I've said, like this will be different for every single website you visit. This is kind of the downside of a tool like this, is like you're writing a custom scraper for one particular website. The next website will probably be different and have a different structure. So just be aware that, like, you know, this works, but it's best for sites where you have a lot of images you want to grab from. You maybe don't want to be doing this if you're just trying to grab 10 images from a single web page or something. I should also add that a lot of websites now use what we call like continuous scrolling, or just like things refresh and reload as you scroll down the page. This is usually done through like JavaScript injected content. Beautiful Soup out of the box doesn't really work well with those pages. So if you come across pages like that, we might struggle a little bit. There are ways around it. What I would probably say is your best bet is actually to use like the that image downloader Chrome extension, because it will work with what's on the page. So if you scroll for a lot of the items and you keep scrolling, you're now up to like 500 items on one page. If you run that image downloader, it'll probably find all 500 images there. If it doesn't, then we can still look at how to fix this. But in general, this gets a little bit more complex when we try to do things with like continuous scrolling sites. So I recorded a video last night that is about 35 minutes, and it is like goes in depth into the process for each of this to scrape the site that Nowco was looking at. I'm gonna do like a more high level sort of discussion around how you go about finding a website, or like figure out the pattern matching. I would definitely recommend, if you're really interested in this, to watch this video before you get started, because I go into a little bit more of the code details, how to write loops, those sort of things. So this will have a pretty, like, this will be a big video if you're interested in this material, and should cover a lot of what you want to do. Obviously the nitty gritty of like what your website needs probably isn't covered here, but it will explain a lot of the process. Okay, so we're gonna look at two websites. Let's see what time we're at. Oh yeah, we'll look at two websites. Yeah, this will be pretty straightforward. So I have uploaded code for both of these. So if you want to see how my script worked, you can go ahead and look at this website. These are both in our GitHub, which is also like linked to in the class. The links are also here in the deck if you're interested. So this is the amount of code we're going to write. So to scrape Nowco's website, it's literally less than 40 lines of code. So it's pretty straightforward. The other one, which I believe, let me see if I can find it here real quick. So the other one is for a site of tartan patterns. And this is, again, about 40 lines of code. So 40 lines of code is about how long each of these takes. If you actually compare this to the other page, they're actually fairly similar. They're pretty similar in the way they're structured and the way in which we go about approaching them. So I'll go through both of them and sort of talk about how I approach it. And then I'll show you some of the code that I write to make this work. Cool. Okay, so let's start with the Japanese stencils. So Nowco sent me this website. It looked pretty cool. I actually have a thing like this hanging in my bedroom, so I was really excited to see a site like this. But you'll see here, there is just a list of lots of images. This is even in Japanese, so I'm using the Google Translate to sort of make sense of it all. So there's a list of, I believe, 30 images on this page, and there's a total of 862 pages. So this immediately says to me, like, okay, I bet this is scriptable, right? So if I click to the next page and I look at the URL up here, I'll see it says skip equals 30. So that tells me that, like, if I change this to skip equals 60, I get the next page. If I change it to skip equals 90, I'll get the next page after that, right? So now I'm sort of seeing, like, there's a pattern here. If I add 30 to that URL count, I will get each page. Cool, that's the first step. So now I know I can get to every page, right? And I believe if I use, let me translate back on. If I click to the end, the last skip is 840. So that means if I go from 0 to 840 in 30 increments, I will get every page of this section. Right now, there might be other sections here. I didn't really dig around much further than this Nowco, but like we figured out how to scrape these pages. So the other pages might be a similar pattern, might be a little bit different. We'll have to figure that out. So that sort of tells me how the page structure works, right? So this is how I can get every one of these pages. Now what I want to do is I want to sort of see like, okay, I know I could grab this image, right? Because this is the image on the page. So if I open image in new tab, okay, these are pretty small. So let me see if there are higher resolution images available to me. So if I click on this link, this takes me to this page, right? And let me see if I open this image, it's also kind of small. But what I notice is if you click on the image, it takes you to a page that has a much higher resolution version. So this is what I want, right? This is the image that I want. So how do I do that? Well, if I were a human, what I would do is I would start on this page. I would click on this link. I would then click on this link and I would download this image. So the thing is that's a human process, but I could teach a 5-year-old to do that, right? Or I would hope a 5-year-old with enough patience could do it. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to have, we're going to use Beautiful Soup to actually write this code. So literally what it's going to do is it's going to start on our skip equals 0. It's going to grab all of the links from these pages, right? So if I click here, it gives me a link that is this pattern. And what's sort of interesting here is you can see this uses PHP. So it's passing in whatever this number is. So I bet if I pass in a 2, I get a new page. If I pass in a 3, I get a new page. So this appears that I can script it either by altering this number or by just going through every item on this page and finding a link to it. So what I end up doing, for a couple of reasons, my personal preferred version is just to go through all the links on each page. Not every website is as nicely coded as this, right? Where every 4, 5, 6, 7 works. Sometimes you'll get a site where like they have like a hash number where it changes a lot and you can't really figure out the pattern from it. So what I tend to do is I'll just go through every one of these pages and grab the URL and then grab that next page and grab the URL and grab the image URL from there. So let's take a look at the code. And again, the links are here. If you know a little bit of coding and want to take a look at them, the API for this is pretty straightforward. So I'm going to go ahead and open this. If you don't have a code editor, I recommend either Sublime Text or Visual Studio Code. They're both free and they both work pretty well, especially for something as simple as this. So how does this work? So basically at the top of any web scraping page you're going to write, just add these 4 lines of code. This basically like says, hey, I'm going to use Beautiful Soup. Hey, I also want to get this package called request. Request allows you to run a URL request, like I'm asking for a page. And then there's a couple other things that we want to use pretty much all the time in here. So we can just use these as well. So next step here is that we just want to run through, and this is, I'll sort of read the pseudocode to you. Basically what this says is, if I were to run this from scratch, I would run it from this. So for I in range of 0, 840, 30. So what does this mean? So this means I want to start at I. So if you're not familiar with variables, this is a variable. We're going to set I equal to 0. Then when I is done being 0, we're going to set it to 30, right? So this is the increment step. So we want to go from 0 to 840 in steps of 30. Then what we're going to do is we're going to request the URL of a page, and we are going to take that, that very top page here, and we're just going to say, I want whatever this is, plus whatever my variable is. So I'm literally going to take 0, 30, 60, and add it to this URL string. So when you ask for that, it basically returns a page. And again, the video that I'm demoing goes into a little bit more detail about how all this works, if you're interested. But basically, like, we have this page now. We've requested this page. And when you run Beautiful Soup, which is this function, on the page's content, using the HTML parser, you get back the entire HTML DOM. So basically what that looks like is if you were to open view page source here, it returns all of this. Now, obviously we don't want all of that. So what we need to do is we need to figure out what we actually want from this. And this is where sort of, again, web dev tools or like those sort of things are helpful. So if you control click on the image you're looking for and you say inspect, Not everyone has this turned on in their Chrome, so if you don't know how to turn it on, let me know. If you do, or you can Google it and probably find out. So what I want to do is I want to find the link to that page. And what I'm seeing here is I see this class called result list, and then I see a list item, which is what li stands for, and then I see a. A is always a link. So anytime you see open bracket a, href, that's always a link. So I see that this links to a page, and this links to the URL of this other page, right? So if I open this, I'll see that this equals whatever the link was here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run a find command. This is going to find all of the links that have an A on them and then have a class of thumbnail. And I can tell that this is a class of thumbnail because of this thing here. So this is CSS. This is just applying a class to this object. This basically says that this is like a anchor of the type of thumbnail. And I'm going to look for the href in there. So again, all I did is I grabbed all the links on this page, and then I took that page and I append it to like another list that is just the URL of this. So I'm basically just going through this one by one and saying, grab all the URLs from here. So when this is run on every single page, right? So first it starts on page 0, grabs all the links from there. Then it goes to page 30, grabs all the links from there. Goes to page 60, grabs all the links from there. So now I've got a whole list of links that have then been applied to a list called subpages. This is basically storing a long text file of all the links that I want to go to next. So I've now got all 864 pages of images. Now what I'm going to do is this is a slightly different type of for loop. This is basically saying for all the numbers in here that are subpages, loop through them one by one and call that variable subpage. So now we're going to grab that URL. And you'll see I'm doing a little bit of funky stuff here, which gets explained in the video. But basically, I'm only looking for that last part of the URL, right? That special code that was AGK000001 or something. And I'm going to do the exact same thing I did here, except instead, I'm just going to request that individual page. So I'm going to ask for that individual page. I'm going to run Beautiful Soup on it so I get back all those DOM elements. Then I'm going to go to that page. And if I click on this and inspect it again, you see there is an image source here, but I don't want the image source. Because again, if you hover over this in Chrome, you'll see that it says 438 by 693. So that is the size of that image. What I really want is I want this link. This link takes me to that high-res version. So once again, I'm going to say, give me all the image links on that page that are an A tag with a class of image. Now I'm going to take all those images. This gets you get a little bit complicated into like how you're sort of breaking these pieces down. But essentially what I want to do then is I want all of the, I want to take just the image link and I want to load the image link in, and then I want to download it. So this is the code from here down that basically downloads it and saves it to a file or saves it to a folder. So you'll see, well, not in this example, but usually I have a folder in here that's called output. And what I'm saying is save that image file to output. So this is all the code I need to write. Again, I sort of ran through this very quickly, but this is how it works. When you want to run this, so the video includes instructions on how to install this code. But to run this, you'll go back to terminal and you will go to that folder. So again, if you've never copied directories, you can do Command C or edit copy. And then in terminal, you can go CD paste and it will take you directly to that folder. So from there, what I want to do is, first I want to make sure that I'm using my Anaconda script or my Anaconda environment. So conda activate, and I believe it's BS4. So now what I want to do is I want to run Python, and then I want to run this script, which is dh-jac.py. And when I hit enter, it's going to be really quiet for a while because it's doing a lot of processing behind the scenes. This is not the fastest scraper in the world. There are ways to write faster scrapers, but for this process, it's pretty much fine. And as it runs, let's see if it started yet. It hasn't yet. It's still running. As this runs, I'll let this run in the background for a little bit, and then we can sort of see images will start to load into here. So you will start to get filled up with images. I'm I'm gonna let this run for just a couple minutes because one thing you should know about doing stuff like scraping these, an ethical perspective is sort of like, one, is it ethical to use the images, which I think is what Leah talked about last week, but also the ethics of using a web scraper like this on a potentially small server. If you download thousands upon thousands of images all at once on someone else's website, you could crash their server. So, you know, I've got a thing in here that basically says to check to see if the file already exists. This is a very kind thing to do. Please make sure you include this so you're not downloading the same image multiple times from someone, because it will incur, depending on what their server setup is, it may incur fees for them. So again, maybe reach out to them and thank them. When you're finished being a model, maybe send it to them and say like, hey, I was really happy working with this. Please like have fun with these videos, that sort of thing. So again, apply all the ethics to this as well, including some technical side of things. Let's see if we have any images yet. We do. So we have started loading images. So we got all these images. Now you'll see, I'm already noticing here, and Nauko, this is a good note for you. These are kind of the same image, right? They're just slightly different colors. So we're gonna have to figure out how to mess with that. There's a ton more work to do here now that we've got these images, but we've got these images. So I'm just going to stop this because I don't want to download any more images from that person. I already downloaded 875 last night or whatever. So that's the process for writing a beautiful soup scraper. Any questions?
Yeah, I have a question. Can you download GIFs?
Yes, I believe this will pretty much already download. If a GIF is saved in here, I believe it will just save it down. I can try that, but I'm pretty sure it will just work. This site doesn't have any GIFs on it, so it's hard to say, but I'm fairly certain that it'll just like, if the file path was the same name, it'll download it correctly, yeah.
Did you try downloading images from a CDN server, which is more, you know, complex because you have a different file path?
Yeah, so this is already set up to just, if the file path is different, it's still gonna grab from the correct file path. Because actually, if you look at the file path for this, so this is actually on a different server. So it does have a different file path than even the page itself. So this will work if you alter some of the code that's here, this will work just fine.
It looks like Adam had a question. Adam, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Yeah. Just if we want to be nice to the server, like how in between requests. Yeah.
Go ahead, sorry.
Oh, okay. How long do you recommend waiting in between requests to like this museum server?
I mean, the truth is most of these servers are probably fine. You know, I would say if you're only downloading 1,000 images, like it's probably fine. If you're going to hit 50,000 images, you might want to like batch it. There's no batch code here, but you could run like a batch process, or like I think it was what you said, which is add like a little bit of delay between all of it. I think in most cases you're probably fine to just run it as is, but make sure you don't run it multiple times on the same thing, because that's when it starts to feel like abuse. So yeah.
Cool, thanks.
Cool, so we're at time. There is another example here. If you're interested, there is the site of tartan patterns, which is again a pretty similar process, except here there's like A to Z. And then when you go to each of these pages, there's a sub page, and then there's like another image here. But I also figured out that this one is, there's some sort of pattern here around like this image, like this reference number, and then like altering the heights and widths. So the code for this one is a little different. You're welcome to like dig through it and sort of see how it works. And if you have questions on it, I'm happy to answer it. This is definitely like more of an advanced process, and I would imagine that for some of you, you'll have a lot of questions on how to do this. So first I would say like, make sure that you really need to do this process, and that the image scraper downloader or image downloader or Chrome extension doesn't give you everything you need. But if it doesn't, like Leah and I can definitely help with that next step and sort of help you walk through things. Also, I'll say that the Beautiful Soup documentation is fairly straightforward. And I also found that there's a lot of good Google, if you just Google like Beautiful Soup tutorial, there's a lot of different tutorials on how to use it. So if you are a little bit more familiar with the code, like this is a pretty cool example to run through, and it does some pretty interesting things. If you're not, talk to Leah and I, and we're happy to help. Cool. So homework for next week is just, every week is going to be the same. It's like Groundhog's Day of a class. Just keep making data sets. So we'll continue making some things. Maybe you want to find a website you can scrape from. Maybe you're interested in playing with some of the tools that Adam uploaded, or I created a video last week around sort of finding the closest approximations of similar images. Almost like a reverse image search kind of thing, but like the most analogous image in a data set. A cool thing you could do with that is actually like have a very small data set of images you really like, and then like scrape a bunch of stuff and then upload that to that Colab notebook and find the closest images that are related. And maybe that gives you an idea for a bigger data set, right? So a lot of what a lot of what you'll sort of learn as you get more in the habit of doing this stuff is you might start having clusters of data sets that you sort of like, here's the small version that is really, really clean. Here's the medium version that has like some more interesting diversity in it. Here's the large version that has some really, really big diversity in it. And you might find that, okay, I can cluster these in like a class style GAN model, or this will work well for like something that is maybe more pix to pix where I want to like go from A to B. So you can sort of start to build up these layers and like these different pieces of data sets. So I'll cover some of that next week. So next week, we're going to cover two things for sure, and maybe some other things based on what I hear from folks in co-working this week. Next week, we're going to definitely cover writing your own object detection classifier. Which is a really nice way to, like, if you create like a small little data set of things that is perfectly labeled, and then you can run it on a big set of things, and it will help find images that are worth using in the future. And then we're also going to talk a little bit, I know one of the common things I hear from a lot of folks is, I have a 250 image data set. How do I get it to 1,000? Or how do I get it to even more images? So I'll show a couple techniques of things that I've learned that do work, especially that work with StyleGAN. I will generally say that they're small returns, right? So if you have 100 images, I can get you to 200 pretty easily, or maybe 400, but I can't get you to 1,000. So regardless, you're probably going to need to find new images, and the way in which you can find those is maybe using reverse image search, or maybe making your data set collection and scraping a little bit of a wider net and finding images that work sort of similarly. So we'll talk about some of those techniques more next week. But yeah, just that's going to be the two things we'll definitely cover next week. If there's other things people are interested in, I'm happy to do that. I also want to do some stuff just for Esteban, because I know he's got some special needs around, with vector artwork. So I probably won't get to it next week, but I might create like an optional week for us if you are interested in it, where I'll show some tools in Adobe that allow you to script things. So that was something that I also brought with Nauka, which is like, there might be some cool things to do with scripting that we can look at for future class. So I'll actually make that an optional class. I'm just gonna go ahead and plan to do it because I know I have a crazy week this week, so I will not get to everything I want to. Folks don't have to show up for that. It's gonna be optional. It's gonna be really built around like Adobe and maybe doing more vector-based stuff and maybe a little bit of Photoshop tooling. And then we'll record that video so everyone can get access to it if they want to. Yeah, so we'll maybe have an optional last week of class because I know this is such a short class. Like just last week alone, I was like talking and I was sort of like, man, this is like this could be like an 8-week class. I could definitely extend this further. So if you have things you're interested in learning more about and we don't get to cover them in this class, please let Leah or I know, because I'm happy to record more videos for folks and or link you to materials of someone who knows the materials better than me. So yeah, if you're interested in anything that you've heard us reference, or just like, okay, how would I go about and do more of this? I'm happy to do more in-depth videos for folks. Yeah, just because this is a short class, and my hope is that you get a lot out of it, even if it is short. So please let me know if you're missing anything or need help in certain areas. Might not always get to it like in the next week or two, but we'll definitely try to in the near future. So with that, class is over. We'll see everyone next week, and especially if it's late where you are and you have to duck out, feel free. I'll stick around for like 10 or 15 minutes if people have any questions or anything. But with that, class is done. Bye, everybody.
Hi, Derek. I actually had a quick question, if that's all right.
Okay, cool.
I would love to try using the beautiful soup scraper. Do you have a recommendation for a museum website that you feel like the HTML structure is like simple enough for someone to like build a scraper for the first time?
That's a good question. I don't actually. I mean, like, I would say the example of what Oh, you know what's good? I'm trying to think about who. So there used to be this website. There still is this website. It just hasn't been updated in years. Which is, this is how I got into like all these archival images and things. There's a website called
Oh,
Bibliodyssey,
wow.
and all of these link to various museums and other websites. This
Oh,
Paul
cool.
K has like, I think there's probably 800 different blog posts here of many things. So what I would recommend is dig through this and see if you can find like a web page that looks really looks pretty simple. Like I would say something like what we were showing for the Nowco's example.
Yeah.
If you find something like that, I would say like take a first pass at trying to write a scraper for it. And if you're into issues, let Leah or I know, and we can definitely send you in a new direction or help provide some things. But actually, did Owen leave already? Owen might have left already because it's really late by him. There's a ton of really beautiful illuminated manuscripts on this site. This is Paul K. Like back in the day, this was like the site I visited every single day. He moves a lot of stuff to Flickr. So actually a lot of these images, if you're interested in these particular images, might be available through like the Flickr scraping. But I mean, there's just so much, there's a ton of really cool ephemera. And obviously this is cool because it's like, you know, outside of copyright for the most case. Hosted on some very weird, like many of these are on like random ass German museum websites, many of which the links are broken now. I mean, this is 5 years old now, and some of his posts are 10 years old. So you might have a lot of 404s. So I just say dig around here and see what you find.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. That's a great resource.
Yep.
I have something to actually add on to Adam's earlier question about removing the background of the video. Because, yeah, I thought of this other thing. Derek, can I share my screen?
Yes. Oops.
Yeah, if you happen to like not have a nice video, you can also run another machine learning model to like detect, you know, the backgrounds and remove backgrounds. Let me share my screen. But I ran this thing called BASNet, which, you know, is available in a Google Colab notebook, but is also available in this program called Runway, which is pretty user-friendly and like easy to use. So here's an example of, I downloaded like, I was just testing out this model and the thing. So this is like, yeah, so this was removing the background from this TikTok video of the rock that I downloaded. It does like, you know, a fairly good job. It would be pretty hard to like do this by hand in a video editor. But yeah, BASNet is pretty powerful in that regard.
Yes, actually, Dania had a question in our small group, which was, I have a lot of low-res images. What can I do to make them more, like higher resolution? There are also models called super resolution models, and their job is to sort of up-res images to varying degrees of quality. Many of them are pretty good, or many of them are better than what you might get out of just Photoshop doing bilinear upscaling. So with the addition of something like a super resolution network and or something like these sort of background removers, you can actually like get 90% of the way through it. I would also say like for things like StyleGAN where you need a lot of images, a couple masks that are off aren't going to ruin a model. So, you know, take the best that you can get without like killing yourself, and you'll get like a pretty decent setup out of that. Yes, and Nauka also mentioned there's a program called Gigapixel AI, which is sort of a standalone app from a team called Topaz Labs that create a bunch of photography tools that are all like machine learning based, and that one is really good. I think they have a 3-day or 30-day free trial if you want to try it, and if you like it enough that you want to buy it, I think it's like $100. But if you want to buy it, I think I have a referral code that'll get you like $15 off. So if you are interested in those things, let me know. Again, I think I won't ever push that stuff on you because like the referral code isn't that much for me. But if you do find it's really valuable and you want to use it, you might as well get $15 off it. So Topaz has a ton of other photography AI tools as well if you're interested in digging around with some of that stuff.
They recently, I don't know if it's recent, but they also have a video upresing one. So it's not just images. And I've actually been using it at work and it does a great job. So if you have like low res videos that needs to be upres to like 4K for some odd reason or like 2K, then it does, yeah, I was like blown away by the quality.
That one is $300, but it is awesome. So yes.
Yes, that was expensive.
That one's
but,
expensive, but I also use it for my own work as well, and it does do a good job. All these upresing networks, you know, what's nice about them is if you know how bilinear scaling works, is, you know, the traditional Photoshop technique doesn't really create new textures. It just sort of takes the pixels around it and tries to do the best guess of what the next pixel should be. Whereas these upresing networks actually introduce new textures at higher scales. So they can actually be much better than the ones. And actually, Photoshop just added their own upresing scale that you have to just like, there's some settings you have to turn on. You can Google it, or if anyone's interested, I can show you where it is. But Photoshop added their own as well. So there's also, if you are a Photoshop user, there's also the new, there's a select subject option in the selections menu. That is also a machine learning model that allows you to select what it thinks is the model, and then you can actually remove the background from it as well. So all these models are sort of doing slightly different things, and they have slightly different qualities, which makes it really hard for us to recommend one over another. It's just sort of like, well, what do you want to do? Or like, what kind of quality of up resolution do you like? Like one thing I'll say is I find Topaz tends to make everything a little crackly. Like it adds like I was doing it with a really low res photo of a hand, and it made all the skin textures really dark and sort of like very sharp. So again, maybe that's not the look you want to go for, and you want to try a different resolution network. All these, like, I think like the number one like image, like open, like, or what is it, computer vision task for any like master's or grad student is like make a super resolution network. There's probably hundreds of them online, and they all do slightly different things, and they all have slightly different outputs, and it's really hard for me to be like, this is the one you should use. The reason the Topaz one works really well, and God, I've gone on forever at this point, sorry. The reason the Topaz one works really well is that it's been trained using really nice, like high quality photography, whereas a lot of other models are trained on like whatever data set someone's data science intern scraped off the internet, right? So like, it's just Topaz Labs will generally have a higher quality because of they're using data that is higher quality. So just like this class, like we're looking for higher quality data to use. Topaz Labs has access to thousands of photographers, and they're using their data to do that. So it's cool. Any other questions?
Yeah, I'm gonna send you a link of the website that I would like to scrape. Here it is, but it's very weird. The code is like, probably they're using a CDN server. Maybe
oh yeah, interesting.
Quickly. So there's like 60,000 images there.
Yeah.
So
I would, this is a great one. I'll ask around in some of the channels I'm a part of. I wouldn't be surprised if someone's already scraped this and it's just available for like, it's on like someone's Google Drive. So I'll ask around and see if anyone has this. I'm sure someone already has access to this. And this is, again, another thing of like, if you can find someone who's already done the job of scraping 60,000 images, don't redo that job. That's a pain. Just find their download or find their zip. I'm sure someone has this. I'll ask around for it.
You have the connections.
Yeah, and I'm happy, like I can share you, like it's just a Discord server. So if anyone wants to go there and talk to a bunch of science nerds, they're very into anime and these types of things. So if you're interested in anime data sets, they've got ones at the wazoo. So, and of course it's mostly female anime. So, you know, take that what you will. Yeah. Yeah, but again, like as you get more into this area, you will find people who have lots of data sets available to you or are really good at writing scrapers and that sort of thing. So access to those things is pretty straightforward.
If you want to curate a data set for like the style GAN class, like upcoming, and you're interested, I guess, like in what we might call visual style, or like, I guess for style GAN, like I'm thinking that like, yes, I can go out and I can scrape 1 million images of apples, or if there's a particular aesthetic that I'm interested in, like what's the range of, like I'm thinking about like printmaking techniques and things like that.
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's one of those questions around diversity that is like very hard to answer. What I would recommend is, so we're actually going to look at, so Peter Bailey's is a coder and an artist who made Where is his notebook? StyleGAN 2. Sorry, give me 1 second. I'm just grabbing his repository here. So this is one of the notebooks, or this is one of the repos we'll be looking at in the StyleGAN class. And he scraped a bunch of settings from WikiArt. So I think Leas has also worked with this data set, but there's a data set of WikiArt images. And he trained this conditional model, or like what I would call class labeled model. So basically he took all the class labels from the styles, and then he was able to separate those out into individual styles. So the model learns sort of like the global structures it needs to, and then it learns individual styles from there. So if this is something you're interested in, I would recommend like just making sure that you like keep things in separate folders, just so that we can structure that at a later date. But this is also true, like if you have like different types of birds, like say you have like, you know, again, a bird type here and a bird type there and a bird type there, like those are also good examples of things where class labels can be really helpful. So my demo will be different types of cats, obviously, but you know, everyone can do whatever they want from there. So yeah. Cool.
Is the training custom StyleGAN 2 models class the next class that you're talking
Yes.
about? Okay.
Yeah. And I think there's one spot open if you haven't signed up for it yet. There might be one spot left.
No, yeah, I signed up on that one.
Okay, cool, awesome.
I just wasn't sure if that was the right one. Didn't know.
Yep, that's the right one. Yeah, and that'll basically
what time
take.
Of day are you teaching it? Oh.
It is this time.
What time of day are you teaching?
It's this
one.
time.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Count me in. Count me in. It's me. I'm taking that spot.
Okay. I'll post a link to it now if you want to grab it. But yeah, so it'll basically be, you know, taking all the models we made in this class and basically generating them in StyleGAN. So that's why we sort of did this this class sort of before it. Yes, there's one remaining. So go ahead and grab it when you can. All right, cool. So if you can make it, I definitely recommend showing up to one of the co-working sessions. Leah and I will be there to help with like Esteban. If we can't find that data set, I'll figure out how to write a scraper for it. And we'll do that together. So yeah, definitely recommend showing up to those with questions. Like show us what you're trying to make and we'll talk through how to make it happen. So yeah, if you have questions about scraping, questions about using the dataset-tools libraries or any other libraries you find, those are the sessions to show up for, and we will walk through it all together. Cool. All right. See everybody next week or on Wednesday, I guess, if you're around then. Okay. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.